Hello, and welcome back to the Knowledge Panel Show. This is episode 33, and today we will be talking about using AI to generate content. So, without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to my lovely guests. We have AJ, Nadia, and Julia. I'm going to get them to introduce themselves a little bit. So, if you don't mind, AJ, we'll start with you. Who are you? Where are you coming to from for what perspective do you have on using AI to generate content? And yeah, what do you think we could be looking at most today?
Yeah, AJ Ghergich, longtime SEO. I am coming from Botify. I am the VP of consulting services there. So Botify enterprise crawler for SEO if you're unfamiliar. So yeah, my perspective is going to be hawkish. I'm bullish. I'm happy about AI and SEO. We can talk a little bit about some of the pitfalls, but I want to look more at the what can we gain from this than what do we have to lose. So that tends to be the perspective that I'll have today.
Brilliant. Nadia.
Hey, I'm Nadia. I'm the head of content and organic growth at a company called Sunnyside. We're in the D2C space. It's a mindful drinking app predominantly. So I head up a lot of the content for like the blog content, website optimization, that kind of thing. But we also have an actual app. But prior to that, I used to head growth at Gauge. We were infographic product, basically used SEO to scale entirely. And my main interest in the topic is a lot of like cutting out the granularity because I'm in the startup space and typically have myself to rely on. So, or a really small team. So, like using different functions like ChatGPT to just kind of ideate the content process is a lot of where I'm using it. And it's been really helpful in cutting down a lot of the fat.
Brilliant. Thank you. And last but not least, Julia.
Hey, I'm Julia McCoy. So, my background is writing, primarily for SEO, inbound marketing. Ran a writing agency, grew it myself, started it at 19 years old, sold it at 10 years later for a nice seven-figure exit. So, it's always been organic and inbound. Like, how do we hit the top of Google? How do we do that over and over for tons of different keyword phrases, clients in all niches? So, I got to see what worked. And then when AI came on the scene, a couple of years ago, I was studying it and I was like, not that impressed. And I got
Mhm.
to say, in the last 12 months, I've been blown away by what's possible. So much so that I left human only writing and now I work for an AI writer. So
Mhm.
it's been said in the space. I went from hating on AI to now, completely the opposite because that kind of happened because the technology is here now. So I'm not afraid to say, like, it's time to leave the hate and the snobby. I call it the snobby writer syndrome because I was that. I was like, I am better than AI. But the truth is, like, we're not, right? What AJ was saying, like, we're at a place where this is truly going to supersede a lot of human functionality. So now I work at Content at Scale, which is the fastest growing AI writer for SEO content. And we're doing about 40 million words a month. Crazy stuff. So, really honored to be here with you all speaking about this very important topic.
Mm. Well, thank you so much, Julia. Yeah, I think what you touched on there is just like, I think we're going to do a big deep dive into the possibilities of AI, and that's really exciting, as opposed to the sort of debates around whether it's useful or not. I think we're all on the same page here that it's pretty useful. So I'm just going to throw out pretty broad question to start off with. So, what is AI in the context of SEO right now? So, why are we all obsessed with it at the minute? You can be as broad, as technical as anything as you like here. I just want to introduce anybody who maybe isn't so familiar with AI and SEO to what we're really talking about.
Kick us
Anyone
off.
want to come in?
Yeah, kick us off.
Go ahead, Julia. I'm going to call you.
I'm the introvert in the room, okay? So that's a great question. And I think the conversation has been a lot of worry. Will Google detect this and then derank it, penalize it because In April of 2022, they actually said in the Webmaster Guidelines, do not create content with AI. It's against our guidelines. And then in September and October, we have Danny Sullivan, the liaison at Google, saying pretty much the opposite. Oh, we were never against it. Okay. So then they revised their guidelines to actually say it's spam that you can't produce. So you can use AI, in other words. So the conversation has been, can I really do that? Because Google kind of flip-flopped there. But the truth is, like, you can, right? And we're seeing it firsthand. Like, you can rely on AI to save, oh my gosh, we had an agency that said they're saving 25x on their cost and time from going from a very expensive writing agency to, we can now produce a 2,500 word blog in literally 2 minutes, and it needs 30 minutes of editing. Like, that used to take 8 hours. So it's like, why not adapt when that's here? Yeah. So first of all, like, you have permission to do this, know that, because it's a thing. And I don't think Google will penalize you just for making AI something you put in your process. But the thing is, you have to optimize it, right? And so that is still a human process. Like, you don't need to fire all your writers just yet. Like, reroute them, have them become optimizers. That's a big topic for us, is like, how do they become optimizers, put a story in there, create it more human-like. So that's what we see happening with AI in SEO.
Brilliant.
Yeah, what you're mainly seeing when we say, I mean, there's AI is a broad blanket. What you're seeing the explosion of is what is called LLMs, so large language models. So Chat GPT, the Bing Chat, all of that, that's all LLMs. If you break it all the way down, here's what's actually happening. It's gotten really, really good at predicting the very next word in a sentence or a conversation. And that's it, full stop. And so when you're talking to these, you're not talking to like a sentient, artificial intelligence. And you're like, what do you think about blah, blah, blah. It's literally predicting the very next letter, word in a sentence. Think about it this way. You've been using this technology all along with texting, right? Where it like predicts that you're like, thank you very much, right? Like, you send text. It's just gotten so much exponentially better that the technology has gone from somewhat useful in email like Gmail or somewhat useful in texting to being able to produce a novel, right? That is cogent and makes sense. It's eerily feels like you're speaking to or talking to a human when you chat with these, because that's how your brain is actually doing it too. You just are, the computations are happening so fast you don't think it through. So while I'm talking right now, some hamster's running around in my head, and it's deciding the very next word, the letter that I should put. And so when something parrots that behavior back to you, it feels human. It feels real, because it's literally how you construct speech. So LLMs are one foot in front of the other, 1 foot in front of the other, 1 foot in front of the other. You've seen this technology before with text, with email. It's just now, to Julia's point, in the last year, remember, AI is exponential technology. Exponential technology is hard for humans to grasp because we think linear. So this explosion to us is like, whoa, what happened? But what's going to happen is a lot of these are version 1s to version 3 or 4. What's version 8 going to look like? And many of them are less than a year old. So this potential that we're talking about isn't just, this is baked, you should use it, how is it today? It's what's happening now is great, but what's going to happen in 2 years when all of this goes from, wow, that was really helpful to help me sort of text my mom back without writing a whole thing, to I just wrote my first novel with the assistance of AI in 6 months from now, that kind of thing.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and I guess just adding to what you're saying, one of the thoughts is, for SEOs, or at least myself, is figuring out how much content is going to become too much content. Like, are we going to get to a point where we're just creating so much stuff that no one's actually consuming it, or are we going to create content for other AI bots to create content? I think that's kind of like where my head goes all the time.
That's where everyone's pointing at each other. Yeah.
Yeah, that meme of everyone, all the Spider-Mans. But Yeah, and that's like one of the areas that I think is a little bit scary, but also really interesting. And part of I think how we use AI as content and SEO people is getting really good at not forgetting that we're writing for people at the end of the day, and trying to get and making sure that that tone and that storytelling comes across, which I think potentially is going to happen in the next few years. Is they're going to get really good at humor and just nuance and subtlety. But for now, that's our domain. So
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything that's just gone on there. Particularly loving the nod to sort of the cognitive mechanisms that we as humans go through. It's a very human process that it's trying to mimic, and I think it's really important to remember that it's trying to be as good as you. So yeah, it's great to have that as almost like the starting point. So my next question is going to be, does unadulterated AI content, so I'm just using that as a way to say unedited, completely just pure AI content, does it rank? I know this is an opportunity to someone to say it depends, and please take it away in that sense. It's a huge question, but I think it's a really interesting thing to start with because that's the worry that people are having, really, isn't it? So if somebody could offer their perspective on, does it rank? Can
I'll
it rank?
jump
Is
in
it
on that.
possible?
I find most conversations that start with unadulterated to end poorly. Uh, but, in this case, I'm going to give it a go. Yeah, the answer is yes, but the caveat is for how long. So I don't get too wound up about, when this first came out, I know some people who were working on AI detection models. So they're spending all this time and energy, and I'm like, hey, that's brilliant. You're brilliant, but it's the wrong thing to worry about. Who cares if AI aided in the assistance of the content? You're solving the wrong problem. The problem to be solved is it any good? Is this quality? And so when you're thinking about this, I think the answer is absolutely. You can spin out a bunch of AI content. It can be mediocre content and it'll rank right up until Google gets really good at squashing mediocre content. And so the what you're striving for is, in a world where everyone gets access to tools like Julie's working with a software tool. Okay, that's good and bad for you because now your crappy competitor can actually start to compete, right? And if they're going to compete and everybody's creating, this, like I said, the Spider-Man effect, they're all pointing at each other. How are you going to make yours that much better? And so you've got to get really, really discerning about what is quality content, because my prediction is Google will do the same thing that it's always done. Remember when backlinks were the big issue and Google came out with this whole thing, we're going to penalize backlinks, and we've created this narc on your neighbor program where you can submit the backlinks and disavow them and all this kind of, like, come on, right? But then what did they actually do? They rolled that back and they said, my bad. Here's what we're going to do now. We're just going to detect if it's a quality link or not and give you credit or not give you credit. Same thing's going to happen with content. There's going to be AI content. There'll be some moment where they penalize a bunch of like content farms and really, really spammy, dicey stuff. My guess is it'll be in healthcare or finance because those are more dangerous areas to have non-factual content. It could actually harm someone in healthcare. My guess is you'll see that. But the whole shooting match, think ahead. Where are we going? Where we're going is, what is quality content? Because you could get down that rabbit hole. I could argue to you today that the content for the past year has been AI generated because most of it's going through a tool like Grammarly, and it's rearranging sentences and reminding you and tweaking things. That was okay, right? Because that's not the point. That's not the thing we're shooting for. The thing we're shooting for is, what is quality content? Really good quality content. You need to be aces at that. If you do that, you're set for the future because that's what the user wants.
And to piggyback off of that, great points, AJ. I think you're calling us out because we have a free AI detector at continent scale. But you're right. And we just talked about this. it's not going to be an issue. Is this written by AI or not? And I think, and Nadya was just saying this as well, the focus really is human. Is this human? And that's something our AI detector does, is we actually focus on, is this 100% human or not? Not, is it by AI? So if you can create quality content, and that's the question we've been asking for a decade, right? Like I was asking that in 2011, what is quality content? We're still asking that today. So it's really that human touch. And, I was looking at a 5,000 word pillar yesterday on how to arrange your quilts. This is for a lady that owns a quilt shop trying to rank in the top of Google. And she went to her warehouse, collected like the top selling quilts, went to her kid's house, framed those quilts in different areas, took individual pictures. And that was the basis of her listicle. And then she went and got the content through our AI tool. So she saved like 6 hours. She didn't have to research the SERPs. She didn't have to put together the structure. It was all there by the AI writer. But then she really humanized it with those pictures of quilts and then going to her kid's house and framing them and doing individual things. Like that's something a robot can never do. It's never going to like go to your warehouse and tell your customer, this is the best product for you. And here's why. And here's how my grandkids enjoy it. So that's really where I think we're going to continue to win, is that human touch. And that's why, like, even working for an AI writer, one of my focuses is teaching people how to embed the human touch. And so I have a framework called Craft, where you cut the fluff, you review, you edit, you add content to make it better, you fact check. That's a big part because, OpenAI says there's no basis of truth. So you got to fact check. And then the last part is trust build, and that's going to be with story. So that I don't think will ever go out of style. Eventually we'll be able to remove a lot of human manual work as GPT gets better and better and better. But that last touch of the human touch, whether it's you going to your shop, getting pictures, or going to a customer, getting some crazy story about how you help them, like that's just never going to be replaced by AI. And the engagement factor afterwards, of engaging with our audience personally. So that's where, like, I don't see AI actually removing the human. I see it rerouting the human. Right. And that speaks to a lot of people that are afraid, like, is my job going to go away? Will I still be able to write for an income? Well, you can, but you have to rethink how you do it.
Absolutely. And to your point, like, so if you think about that AI detection, and not backtracking on my statement, I stand by my original statement, but think of it this way. What if you're using an AI detector to just detect vanilla effort, right? Like this is stock canned vanilla offering without that human touch, without everything you just said. And so remember, if you're going to go with that, your competitor can do that too. So you've got to do what Julia just said, go that extra mile, humanize it, make it punch, right? And then you're going to be set up for success in the future because you've actually generated great content instead of good content, right? Like good just is going to become average when everybody has access to these tools to make content at scale. Good won't be good enough, right? You're going to have to go that extra mile. So I like that point.
Yeah. And I think also you brought up a point about storytelling, right? And I think the angle of storytelling, it comes from, like you said, going and actually showing that in the real world process of collecting all those quilts. But other things too, like just the data around what your product might collect, right? Like having actual credible information that you're continuing to put out, creating more sources that other people can use or other AIs can reference for their content. Those are all things that I think will continue to exist. And I think to your point, yeah, I had the same note where I was just like, yes, but for how long? Because Google always comes through like the Eye of Sauron scoping out when people are using the rings of AI, and it will find you, right?
Gryffindor for that reference right there. That was solid.
5 points for Gryffindor. Thank you. Different.
Well, yeah, I think this is really cool. Sorry, go ahead, Nadya.
No, let's wrap that comment up. You take it away.
No, okay. Well, I'm really interested in everything that's been talked about here. So I think we're all pretty much on the same page of yes, but for how long? And the element of human touch seems like a non-negotiable aspect of this conversation. So I guess just to be to roll off on that, how are we adding this human touch? What tips, tricks, what are you guys doing to either prompt AI to write? I don't know if you can make it write more human, if this is the right way to say it, because obviously it's not human. What should we be doing when we approach it at the very beginning?
I can take the lead on this one. So something we're doing is, and what we focus on is SEO at scale, right? So that's primarily what we're in the mix of. So what we're seeing is a lot of agencies, teams, brands, they're coming to us and they're like, can we just use content at scale, an AI writer, and then let our writer go? And we're like, hold up, wait, no, you can't. So here's what we tell them: have that writer be the one that's adding story. And the way to do that is to give that writer access to your AI writer, have them play with it, get familiar with it. You know, a lot of writers are actually being told right now, like, don't use AI. Some of them are banned from it by their boss or different companies. Learned that the other week. That blew my mind. So if you actually give your writer permission, like, here's the tool, here's the login, go use it. You know, the writer will not fear it anymore and be able to get their hands on it. But like, your best asset is actually that writer and what they do with that content. So once they're in the AI tool, they're producing this long form content, which if you're using our tool, like, it's 2 minutes and it's 2,500 words up to 7,000 words. That alone, like, that saved my writer 7 hours. So she went from 7 hours down to 1. But what she's doing is she's going in there and adding, like, at least it's those 5 critical things. So the first thing she's doing is editing. Like, we're redlining it. We are being ruthless. You know, it's the same problem we had with human writers, still having it today with AI, is fluff. You know, it writes a lot of fluff and you got to cut that to get to the gold. So that's the first thing they're doing, is being a really good editor. And then the next part is optimizing and reviewing that content. So did we use our keywords enough? Do we use it in creative ways? Is it there in the subheaders? You know, the tools are getting really good at doing that for you, but they're still not exactly human at it. And you can kind of tell, like, it just, I was reading a sentence and the sentence didn't even start correctly. It just was lowercase with the keywords. So you have to even make sure the keywords are used in a human way. And then the next part is adding a lot of visuals. So I'm sure, Nadya, you at Ghergich, right? You were doing infographics. Like, that adds so much value. If you go and get a designer, you have them create custom images, or you actually go and build your own data graphs, or maybe get a screenshot from, you know, a benchmark study. So having a writer go and source all of that, or say, hey, designer, I need this, and they can direct that designer, that goes a long way in adding that human touch. And then, like, you want them to also fact check. You want them to, like, Google that fact, Google that statistic. If it's like the history of SEO, did the AI actually tell us the history of SEO, or did they just BS? Like, AJ, your bio might be completely BS. I've seen that happen. AJ created ChatGPT. Like, that bad.
No.
I read that the other day. It said a LinkedIn influencer created ChatGPT. So you really want to double check your facts. And again, like, that's your writer. That's your best asset, is that writer using that AI. And then the last part is that story and trust. Like, that's where you want your writer to end. Is their story? Are we including testimonials, case studies? Are we even mentioning our story? If this is a piece where, you know, like the lady that was doing the quilt shop, like, she needs to tell her story. How did she get to her love of quilts? Well, that the reader will want to know that, because the reader's already interested in this topic. So bring in your story, like, more than ever, because that's when you know this isn't AI content. This is written by a human, even if you did use AI to save 7 hours. So transforming your writer into an AI editor / optimizer is a huge way to get past, okay, this is AI and it's not that good, to this is good content and it's ready to publish.
Mhm. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, to that point, like, just adding on how I've been using it, because I don't write a lot of content necessarily, but there's a couple points AJ mentioned before, like, there's a challenge for people in the healthcare space and the wellness space. And we're in that space. Like, Sunnyside talks about alcohol health a lot. And so we need to be really careful because we're talking about how does this impact your heart, your lungs, like your mind, your liver, stuff like that. And so we actually have a really good review process now with medical advisors that can come in and read it and actually fact check for us and add those little quotes or those little data pieces that really draw or make a point to acknowledge that credibility. So those are like other ways that you can kind of tap into the space in the same way. It might just take a little bit more time. And then the other part is we also have access to a lot of anonymous data on how people consume alcohol, and so that kind of stuff becomes really interesting for like press and content that we're creating around that, visuals, whatever, adding that that again, going back to new source data or like new information that no one really has access to. So if you have anything like that that you can use to add to the content you're working on, um, that can be really, really helpful and keep it human and keep it real. But also there's so many potentials for using it in on the process, right? Like what are parts of what does your funnel look like when you're creating content from ideation to promotion, right? How are you, what pieces can you actually cut out that AI can do for you? And one of the things I'll do is I'll like literally just list out my entire process, like minute by minute, just to figure out what am I doing to get to this point, and then kind of road mapping it or making a timeline of that. And then I'll just figure out what chunks I can remove using AI. And that can cut down like a lot of time as well. So it doesn't necessarily just need to write the content for you, but it can help almost act as a glorified virtual assistant, right? In your process.
100,000%. That's my advice to most people listening to this. So I previously, two slots back, I owned a boutique content SEO content and strategy agency, and it was acquired. So it's kind of funny because Julie and I have similar path, and we're both sitting here going AI content. Like you would think we only did human content, very picky about our editors and process and everything.
True.
So, yeah, this is how I approach it, and I think you can copy this. So we were talking before we came on. There's two main issues that you need to understand. One, very likely you're getting a bad result because you're not chaining your prompts and you're just asking for too much in one shot. And the second is long-term memory. These tools don't have it, and we can talk about that in a second. But let's just go back to what Nadya was just saying. Like this, I'll give you the breakdown of how I would approach a topic. So I just pulled up while we're talking, actually, a piece of content. I'll change the topic. So I would go to Chat GPT and I would start off explaining what I call the situation, like the MTV old character from MTV. So I would say, you're a human resource manager, you're struggling because of the economy, but you have, physical signs of employee burnout all around, all these different things. And essentially, I write out this paragraph or two explaining that, as an HR manager, this person just is balancing the needs of employees with a lot of stress with management who's under economic stress, right? And so I explain the situation of what type of environment I'm going to write this piece of content in. And then I start. And just like you were saying, it's all process. So the first thing I would do is say, brainstorm, a list of 10 provocative questions that would be weighing on your mind if you were in this situation. Okay. Then I get that, and I would say, brainstorm 6 actions that you could take as an HR manager that would balance the needs of all needs presented in the situation. Then I go down and say, okay, give me 3 pros and 3 cons that would be considered when you're addressing that situation. And then I would ask 10 questions that would be on the mind of someone in that situation. And then I would ask for 5 headlines to be written. And then I would ask for 10 titles written in New York Times style to be written. And then actually you can use AI. It's interesting. So like AI gives you those 10 titles. You can say, pick which one is the most engaging and tell me why, and then it will. And so what you need to do is break your process down. When when we're writing an article, there might be like a 75 step if you really get, it's kind of like that example of how to build a sandwich. And then you realize you didn't tell someone to unscrew the peanut butter, jar or whatever, right? You're like, oh, I missed a step. Go that level of anal approach, step by step by step by step. And once you then automate that, which is what a lot of these tools are actually doing, they're taking a lot of those steps for you and automate it because they've done the work behind the scenes. But taking that process, you can get, even if you never write an actual word with the AI, you can hand a writer the most beautifully researched, well thought out, here's what you should write about, here's the pros and the cons, here's the moral issues, here's things you should check on, here's questions that are on their mind, like this cheat sheet to writing a fantastic piece. Now, of course, you can take it a step further and actually have it write the content and the modules and give suggestions. But process, like you were saying, is amazing way to get started with AI. And that type of prompt chaining a prompt will lead to so much better output and outcomes for you than just running in there and going, hey, I'm writing an article for HR. Can you write me one that talks about burnout? Do the chaining and you're going to be in a much better situation, unless you're using a tool that's already kind of doing that in the background.
Yeah, brilliant. So what I'm getting from this personally is actually a perspective change on how we need to be approaching AI, which I think is a really interesting thing. So both AJ and Nadia talking about making it far more granular. So I think actually it's a lot more effort. It's a skill in itself to be able to write content or create these prompts with AI. And just like stopping yourself from going, okay, we want to write just a whole thing about this. The prompting needs to be so granular, and yeah, I can see exactly where you guys are all coming from here, which is really cool. So I guess, well, in terms of um pros and cons, we'll just go for really basic kind of pros and cons here in terms of the context of SEO and AI. I know we've already touched a lot, especially Julia, on the human touch aspect, and that's the cons that we just can't get over. But do the pros outweigh the cons 1,000,000%? Is there even a debate here anymore, or are we 100% all on board?
Well, yeah, look, no, the pros far outweigh the cons. It's not even close. And like I said, don't think like a human. A lot of this came out in the summer of last year, and here we are. So summer of last year, a lot of the large language models came out, and then fast forward today, we're now talking about Bing, because Bing is using this technology. Like, what kind of alternate universe are we in, right? And so, what do you think is going to happen in 2 years? So you cannot stick your head in the sand here and be like, I bet this goes away. No, you will go away, but it won't. And so the pros far outweigh the cons. The main con that I run into right now, though, we talked about this right before the call, right before going live, is the issue of long-term memory. It's an issue that's going to get solved probably in the next 6 months. But when most of the large language models are trained and you're talking to somebody like you pulled a human through a portal and you're talking to them from 2020 or 2021. And so as soon as you start talking about a fact today, it has no idea. It literally just came through the time portal because that's when it was trained. So think of these large language models as a stock vanilla smart human. So if you ask a stock vanilla smart human, why is the sky blue, in like really good detail, tell me. They're not, just ask somebody today. They won't be able to tell you. They'll be like, I don't really know if I really think about it, right? But if you gave them 20 minutes to research it, an hour, 3 hours, 7 days, they could come back with an amazing presentation on why the sky is blue with facts and figures. It's just that the AI can do all of that in milliseconds if you solve for the long-term memory. So what we've been doing is injecting facts into our prompts. So know that you're talking to a time traveler from 2020, right? When you're talking to Chat GTP. So I'm talking to the time traveler. They have no idea. And especially I ran into this in health and life sciences. So what you do is you can use tools like, well, I won't even say it doesn't matter the tool, but you can scrape content that is quality content with your favorite scraping tool. Let's just say that. So we would inject, if we were talking about diabetes, we would inject the top articles from Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, all gov.gov, studies. And so what we would do is take and create a resource library inside of that prompt. So we would say something like, hey, you're a diabetes chatbot. Now here's your resource library that we're injecting bits of content and facts based upon the query or the question about diabetes from a trusted source. So now you have blank human put in from 2020 that maybe doesn't know as much about diabetes, but you're giving them quality information from relevant cited sources. Now the output is a game changer. I was able to work on this and do actually a chatbot for diabetes that was really, really damn good, because every question it would query and insert data. And you'll notice if you talk with Bing's chatbot, it does this. If it doesn't know the answer, it holds for a second and then queries and pulls in data. What it's basically doing is injecting stats into its prompt. And so you can mimic this behavior quite easily. So you can take your field. So if you were in quilting or whatever, I have no idea, but I'm assuming there's certain types of instruments or sewing techniques or procedures that if you inject that into the prompt in the resource, create a resource library. And when I say resource library, you just tell it it's a resource library and put little little blockers and like, here's my facts. Like, this is what this actually means. Watch the content that comes out the other end. It'll be amazing. It'll blow you away. But it doesn't have long-term memory like Dory from Finding Nemo. It doesn't have that. And so if you try to just keep talking to it like it's an expert at everything, it is not. So right now you have to inject the facts. In the future, it'll be easier to do that. But those are my main two things that I've learned. Chain your prompts. Don't trust it with really factual information, especially around health and life sciences or finance, especially if you're not injecting quality data so it gets smart quick about the topic. Otherwise, you're gonna get garbage out.
And I can back that up. The biggest con for us is definitely facts along with story. Like those two things, they're not there. It's writing or creating things that based on data points that it knows. So that's honestly the con, right? It doesn't know like how a human thinks. It doesn't know a creative story offhand. Like if we're writing a blog and it's going on the Content Hacker blog, I'm going to be making Lord of the Ring references, and that might not automatically occur in that piece that AI spits out. So my writer is going to do that. I'm going to do that. So those two things for us are the biggest con. You have to fact check and you have to add story, personal touch, personal tone. It's just not there. I think the personal touch will be really hard. Although like Nadya was saying, one day we might even be there as well because of how nuanced this is going to get. But right now we're definitely not there. So back to your question, Jeannie, too, of unadulterated content. That's why I think maybe it'll rank, but later on it might not. You might get penalized. As Google gets smarter, gets ahead of, okay, this isn't quality content. This does read more like spam. So those are definitely the cons. But to me, those are also, I think, a lot of security for people that are worried about losing their job. You won't if you adapt, and that's what you're looking for now, but you're just not spending 10 hours on the brunt work that now AI can completely replace, because we are there too. And that's the pro. The pro is time savings and cost savings. Like you can create a highly profitable writing agency now, the one I sold, AJ, you know this. And if your baseline is AI, oh my gosh, like your profit margin, that AI won't disappear on you. They won't go MIA. They're going to show up every day. Like that's hard on the human alone. So time and money, like you're going to save so much. And that's why I'm telling people, like, run to this, test it out for yourself, put it in your business. It could completely change how you do business.
Absolutely, yeah. They come to work hungover way less often. But back to that chaining idea. Remember, you Nadia had it right. Like instruct it step by step by step. So one of the things when I need stats and facts, so I would go out, let's say you use SEMrush and you grab all of the featured snippets around a topic. Let's say I was writing a topic about finance and I need it to be correct. So I would grab all my featured snippets. That means they're good, typically fact-based question Q&A type content. Then you send your screaming frog or whatever you want to do to scrape. You grab that content. And then all you have to do, again, is think it through. Like tell ChatGTP to scan each article and extract the most relevant or interesting statistics and cite its source. You do that for 60 pieces of content. Well, now you have this really amazing cheat sheet of the most interesting stats, statistics, who to cite, because it listed this came from blah, 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 blah on Forbes. This came from blah, 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 blah on NerdWallet. Now use that as your resource library when you're writing an article about qualitative easing or some crazy topic that has to be exactly right. Give it the facts. But you don't have to, I can't stress enough that breaking down the task, that it can do all those little micro moments, but you got to think it through, put the process together. And once you do that, it becomes beautiful. But without the process, you're just going to get vanilla content that is not going to be great and won't stand the test of time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think my next question, just off of that, especially since we've been sort of talking around it and not quite attacking it, is this issue of actually can we trust AI? So I know you guys are talking a lot about how, we have to fact check these things, but it's sort of that's quite a big thing to start to put your trust into something that could go so terribly wrong, and at what point can we sort of, I don't know, at what point is there just how's the best way to say it? At what point can we trust AI? Do you think it's gonna get better, or do you think we'll always have to be um babysitting it like this with expertise and originality and stuff like this, I guess, because the stakes are so high if you get penalized, I guess, especially in those areas that you guys were all bringing up before.
I'd rather be safe than sorry. Just saying. So I'd always want a humanly optimized, even if it's like the best writer in the room, because it still doesn't know what's going on in my brain. It still doesn't know what's going on in my client's brain. It still doesn't know those things. So until it can read minds, and that's questionable, I'm not going to write that off, because I can't believe how far it came in just 1 year. Until we're there, you have to put the human in. Otherwise, I think you lose something, right? And Nadia was talking about this earlier, the audience factor. Like that audience actually knows. And I tested this. I had ChatGPT write some tweets, did a completely AI written Twitter thread. It read good. It looked good. And then I did one in my kind of pointing fingers, direct, kind of lighter tone. You could call it weird. That's maybe my style. So a weird tweet by Julia and one by AI. And the one by me had so much more engagement, and no one really knew the difference, or did they? So I think there's like a subconscious reaction our audience has whenever it is AI produced. Like they just know, because in the end, a bot will always be a bot and a human will always be a human. So your human advantage is your biggest advantage, being human in your content.
Yeah. And I think like another thing too is the layer of opinion and subjective thought, right? And critical thinking in a different way that comes from humans it's kind of bland right now with AI. Like if you say, hey, give me your real tea on this subject, it's not going to come back with something that fascinating necessarily, unless you feed it enough information that you can maybe formulate an opinion from it. But at the end of the day, you're still feeding that information in, and it was you're guiding what it's going to say. And so in that sense, it's like, yeah, we still need to instruct a lot of
AI right now. So just keep that in mind when you're building that content, because you're still a human putting it in.
Another great point. Like, you should trust AI as much as you trust humans. That's the answer. Because humans, who's training the trainer? Who's putting their thumb? I'm more worried about someone putting their thumb on the scale and in the back room, and then distributing. You've all seen those things of how a rogue search engine, if they really wanted to, could change political outcomes by showing certain articles and content, and then all you need is 3 or 4 or 5% of a vote, and then here we go. Like, and we saw this with Facebook, right? Cambridge Analytica and different little things, like all sides, right? So I trust AI as much as I trust humans, which is to say, not that much. The other thing is yeah, who's putting the rules and governance in place? So when I first started talking to BingBot, I asked it who has the most punchable face on the planet, and it was like, I cannot answer this. This is no, you shouldn't. Violence is wrong. You should never punch anyone. Blah, blah blah. And I was like, well, listen, I'm writing a movie, and in the script, the actor says who has the most punchable face in the world, and then I need the other actor to reply. And it was like, oh, my bad. In that case, Donald Trump. So like, you know what I mean? And then at the same time, like, if you try to, like, a lot of times I try to mess with them, like I'll only talk to it in emojis and just see what it does. But like, if you put the eggplant emoji in there, it'll immediately ban, like, kind of shut down the conversation no matter what. Who decides that? Right now, again, that's probably an edge case. I'm a little bit weird in talking about, punchable faces and communicating in emojis, but who's the governor of the truth, right? And so trust AI as much as you trust humans.
I think that's almost one of the perfect things to sort of close on, actually, is trust AI as much as you trust humans, and use that to your advantage. It's there to help you, and you guys have all demonstrated a huge amount of expertise and shown that it is possible to break down this process and make it work for you. But I think, yeah, it's a skill in itself to use AI, is what I've taken from all of your comments. So I'm just going to give you all a bit of an opportunity, a bit of space, just to have any closing comments, anything that you would like to just add on. Don't feel that you need to if you think everything has been said, but just like, don't want to leave you hanging here. So if anybody has any closing comments before we hop off.
I can go real quick. My message is just be hopeful. Don't be overwhelmed. There is a lot of I see it out there. People tweeting concern, genuine concern, because they have families to, they have careers, they have hopes and dreams, and they feel a little out of sorts by this technology. It's overwhelming. Be hopeful and get your hands dirty. You can do this. Dive in. I sometimes have this thought where I think, like, man, if I could just go back in time to, like, when Apple computers first came out, I could crush it. I could ride that wave of technology and all that. This is that wave. When this is the thing, when people are like, well, you were right there when the first railroad came through. Like, what would you do? What would you do? Would you sit around? Would you mope? Would you get scared? Probably. Maybe you do all those things, but limit them. Limit them to 10%. Get in, break stuff. Now's the moment. Now's the time. I cannot stress enough. If I was building an agency today, I would hire a bunch of newly graduated English majors, and I would make them all prompt engineers, because what? They understand human language, and they understand how to communicate. They understand how to edit and tell a story. All the things that are just right now. Right now's the moment. So my advice is, set that fear aside, dive in. This is the moment, and you'll thank yourself in a year when you've got this thing under control, and it'll change the trajectory of your career. I guarantee you, especially if you're early in your career. So that's my thought.
100%. Couldn't have said it any better. I would add to that, follow experts that are talking about this and look for people that are in it, one of the reasons why I took this position in content at scale was to actually be in it. I'm a coach and consultant, and I can't really be that if I'm not in it. How am I going to teach you how to do it? So don't be afraid to jump in, like change who you are or change what you do, and go for it, because like AJ said, these are new times that we won't see again. This is like when the internet came out. Like, it is that tremendous. So follow the experts, learn everything you can, and just like you said, get your hands dirty. Don't be afraid of doing that.
Yeah, I'm not going to add anything because I think you guys summed it up pretty nicely. So those are my two.
That's absolutely fine. I think what a perfect way to end. Really optimistic, which I'm a big fan of. I'm just going to pull in David now, the producer, to talk about next month's podcast and introduce our next time's guest. So thank you.
Sure. Okay. Well, next month we're going to be on the 3rd Monday of April. That's a week after Easter, Monday the 17th of April, 4 p.m. UK time, British Summer Time, 11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. The subject will be technical SEO in 2023. We've already got 2 guests confirmed for that, Nikki Halliwell and Serge from Jet Octopus. Sign up at theknowledgepanelshow.com if you'd like to be part of the live audience. Always good to have some questions, some interaction to add to the wonderful value that our panelists bring.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thanks so much to all of my guests for imparting your wisdom and putting such a positive spin on AI. So you've alleviated a lot of my fears and hopefully a lot of our listeners' fears. So thank you so much, and hope to have you on the podcast again really soon.
Yeah, thanks for having us.